Welcome back to Kings of Columbus Sunday Sound Off. Doug Lamarice and Bill Landis here on a Sunday morning after Ohio State's. Reading this graphic here, Landis is 42-17. Is that correct? That's quite a thumping the Buckeyes put on the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, and almost doesn't do it justice.
Yeah,
it felt like maybe it was more like 60 something to 3 the way that game played out. But yes, thumping is a good word for it.
No, because they scored on the first 3 possessions, right? 21-0. It felt like maybe you're headed toward like the 56 or what was it? The first half against Michigan State in 21, where they scored a touchdown every time they had the ball and just were.
I think that was 42-0 at halftime. I think.
Yeah.
So
a great win for Ohio State. We are here to react and share in the vibes of what our Ohio State Tech subscribers shared with us overnight. Bill gathered them, and we'll run through a bunch of stuff. We have some PFF grades. We have an inside look. We want to go 20,000 feet. We want to go inside the game. Bill, of course, was there live. I'm still in a hotel. I was not there, but certainly watched it. And if you want to be a Tech subscriber here for this playoff run, what the heck? You can still join us, 614-662-4509. You can send a text to that number to sign up, and then it's $6 a month. And if you did it now, you'd get it through the national championship game. So that'd be a good $6 investment potentially for you. All right, Landis, vibes. The folks are feeling good. I like when the dedicated, educated, loyal Ohio State fans are feeling good because they care about this team through thick and thin. And they climbed up Rocky Top, baby.
They did. Yeah, and it was all good. Like as you can imagine, I don't think there's anybody who was upset with the way they beat Ohio State.
Why did we score 60?
A little puzzled maybe, but not upset by how Ohio State played and that win. So I want to start with this one. It's from Luke, who is always very thoughtful, I think, with the text that he sends in. You can tell he puts a lot of time into it. This one's a little longer, so bear with me, but I thought the sort of running dialogue here was a nice summation, I think, of how people were feeling throughout the game. And keep in mind also that this was sent in at around 9:30 Sunday morning. From Luke, I thought Ohio State was going to lose before the game, and the most heathenistic part of myself thought that Ryan Day was going to find absolute under rock bottom by figuring out a way to lose after being up 21-0 when it was 21-10. The entire game, I felt like I was looking at a slow motion car crash. It didn't make sense and doesn't make sense. I'm a therapist, and I Googled, what emotion is it called when you're elated and mad at the same time? Google said ambivalent. Does that make sense? The defense was the defense. Since Oregon, they've been amazing or great or good in every game. I simply did not know the offense had this in them. It was maddening because the players have been there all year. The amount of times I yelled to my wife, quote, "Where has this been all year?" was astounding. I'm so happy. I think I'm still a little drunk. This is the best they've looked since September against Western Michigan. I don't know what to write anymore. Go Bucks.
That's a therapist. Again,
yeah.
People I would like to share
That's
with that. So I hope everybody's pouring one out today. No, pouring one out means saying goodbye. I hope everyone's raising a glass this morning of orange juice or coffee or what's the thing when they put champagne in the orange juice? What's that called? A fuzzy navel?
A mimosa.
Mimosa, sorry.
Yeah.
To the 12-team playoff. Because this is the kind of thing. This is the opportunity John Cooper never got. This is redemption. This is opportunity. And how difficult it would have been, Bill. Please realize that where has this been is such a better question to be asking than I wonder where that went. Or will it ever be back, right? This idea of that they had a chance to show it again. Offensively, didn't you think it was always in there? They just had to correctly bring it out. I did.
Yeah. No, I thought it was there. I was just very uncertain that they were going to find it. And I don't know. I guess I would say that I don't think they've ever quite looked like this. Through the course of the season. Maybe I'm wrong about that. There were some other games. I know Luke pointed out the Western Michigan game as one, but in a game against a competent opponent, it's been a while, I think, since Ohio State's offenses looked like this, because I don't think it ever looked like this last year either. So that was where the uncertainty lies. But when you look at the players, you definitely can convince yourself that there was an opportunity to find it. I just didn't have a ton of confidence in it. I didn't sense that a lot of the fans did either. I know some did. Some of you, you're ride or die. You're going to believe in the Bucks no matter what. And I get that, and I respect that, and I appreciate it. But it was hard to embrace that idea based off what we saw from Ohio State the last time they were on the field. But they found it, no doubt about that.
Was there anything about the way the Tennessee defense played that was so substantially different than the way that Michigan played that they could not have done this or done a version of this against Michigan?
I don't think so. Like I think Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, maybe it turns out, are better than anything Tennessee might have on its defensive line. It's still a very good defensive line though for Tennessee. I just think like the plan and the execution and the energy were all better. And if any of that were applied to the Michigan game, I think Ohio State probably would have won that game.
Yeah. So I do think where was this is an absolute. It's the first question I had. Like how it is, and honestly, I think it's you try not to have that be the first question because I think the first thing you try to react with when Ohio State plays very well is like, wow, they're playing well. It's not instantaneously, why didn't they play this way before? But it didn't take you long to get there because it was so starkly different than Michigan. And I think, there's going to be a continued question about this in the offseason of this is not the first time. This was the worst example of that, man, they just didn't seem like themselves schematically and play calling the way they attacked it against Michigan. And then that it still clearly was in there. But the bottom line is I don't think it's going away again. Now, Oregon will be more prepared to stop it because Oregon is incredibly well coached and does have, I think, 1 through 11 on defense, and they've played Ohio State before. So they're absolutely going to be prepared for this. I would not expect it to work as well, but this is who they are. And again, in a post-mortem at the end of the year, whatever happens, I do think it's reasonable to sit down and say, what does it take? How can Ryan Day and this staff get to a point where they are able to be who they are at the most opportune times all the time? Doesn't mean you win every game, but at least put your best foot forward. But I expect that the rest of the year, and I think they can. And when we're going to talk about offensive line, but it wasn't that the interior of the offensive line was perfect. It's that they found a way for it not to be the number one thing, where it felt like every offensive line interior failing became the number one thing against Michigan because of how they chose to go about it. And this is a huge credit for them that you don't have to win every matchup. Just don't let that be the matchup on that play that matters the most. And so when you, as you said, when we talked about this on KOTN on Saturday night, and I know a lot of people watched and listened to that, when they throw a bubble to Emeka Egbuka to start the game and then hit Trevion Henderson out of the backfield on a little sideline route on the first drive, it's like, okay, this is just a different idea of this. And to end it with a deep shot to Jeremiah Smith, that's just who they have to be. And I think they've always known that. You've known it. I've known it. Everybody watching and listening to this has known it. I think at times the only people who haven't known it are them, but they sure as heck know it now.
They know it now. And it was clear to me that they knew it coming out of the Michigan game. And I guess the thing that's hard when you're in that situation, just sort of listening to what Ohio State is saying, and there's a 3-week kind of period between games, is are they just saying it because they know that's what they're supposed to say, or are they saying it because they believe it? I think now with the benefit of hindsight, they were saying it because they believed it. They knew that they screwed up tremendously with their game plan against Michigan. And we can probably get into the psychology of that another time if we want to, but they came out of it, I think, in a better place, knowing what they have to do to win, knowing what their best option is to win games, which I think was clear to everybody. But maybe sometimes in the fog of going through the season, you lose sight of that, or I don't know what that is. But they have relocated sort of what makes them tick, and I think you have now an opportunity to put together a defense that has played very well since the Oregon game, basically in like every facet, with an offense that is perhaps now finally hitting its stride and figuring out exactly what it needs to be. And we have some questions we can get through later about like thoughts on the rest of the playoff. But I'd imagine that is a scary proposition for the remaining teams in the postseason if Ohio State has those two things cooking at the same time.
So I was more put off on the first couple plays than you were by Ohio State having to call a timeout on the third play, by Will Howard missing probably his only throw of the game, but it was like the second throw he made was behind Emeka Buka on a crosser. By Tegrishabola getting blown up instantaneously and giving up a sack on the first third down that was saved by a face mask. And I don't think it changes the outcome of the game, but it would have taken longer for Ohio State to get started if that Tennessee defensive lineman had not face masked Will Howard on that first. If it's just been a sack and it's like a 3 and out, I'm not saying Ohio State fans in the stadium would have booed, but it would have been a different vibe as opposed to the first drive ending with a deep shot to Jeremiah Smith, which is what everybody dreams of. That's the best ending you can have to a drive. Of course, a touchdown, but a touchdown that is a deep shot, a perfectly thrown ball to Jeremiah Smith smoking his dude. That's what people want. They want that guy. And it almost ended with a sack surrendered by the weak link of the offensive line. That would have been quite a difference.
Yep.
But so the first 5 plays, I was like, this is not great. But then when they did that, you saw Jurassic Park. Now we're playing movies Bill hasn't seen.
I've seen Jurassic Park a lot. Yeah.
You've seen Jurassic Park. Okay. So the old guy says life finds a way.
The old guy doesn't say that. No. Jeff Goldblum says that.
Oh, yeah. No, remember, you want me to do a Goldblum now? Is that what you want? Life finds a way. So when they were, after they kind of, I felt like they had three ways they sort of stepped on their own toe in the first 5 plays. And then it was just like, just throw it to Jeremiah Smith. I kept thinking talent finds a way. Yeah. And I was thinking about Jurassic Park. Life finds a way. Talent finds a way. And then it felt like if you just, as much as sometimes we say with Ryan Day, like, where are the trick plays? Where are the different things? It feels like sometimes he, in big games, just believes in his talent almost too much. But then at the same time, like in the Michigan game, that wasn't it, because they didn't just let the talent go. It felt like to me that they kept the dinosaurs in the cages. And it's like, you have these dinosaurs. Why are they in a cage? And then once they figure out, and this might have been whatever the team meeting was, I think it was the dinosaurs picking the lock. The velociraptors are up there with their talons and they're getting out. They got out. And they called the meeting to tell the coaches, we're getting out. You put us in here. I don't know why everybody's like, Michigan game, all the dinosaurs in the cage, please. They were like, what is this? Are we having a meeting? Oh, they'll let us out again. And they didn't let them out. So I didn't feel like those first 5 plays from the coaching staff. I was like, I wasn't like, here they go. I was like, they did it again. They had 2 weeks for this, and this is what they came up with. And then talent found a way.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, the dinosaurs are out of the cage. Feed the dinosaurs. And then they were throwing goats to them. They're throwing cats to them. They're throwing cows to them. And T-Rex Jeremiah Smith is eaten. And so it's not that they bailed it out, but the talent was just so extreme. It was obvious then by the end of the first drive that just let them do this. And all the times this year, like, I didn't think Will Howard threw absolutely perfect deep balls every time. He threw a couple that were perfect. But even like the one to Emeka that was down the field was probably like an 8 out of 10, but it was by far good enough. And we talked about it on KOTN going in. They threw the deep ball Ohio State less than any team in the playoff. Will Howard only had like 33 throws of 20 yards or more coming into the playoff. And then you watch this game and it's like, why was that? Why did they do this more all year? So anyway, in the end, you can pretend that you're the guy who built the dinosaur island and that you're really in charge, but the dinosaurs are in charge, and the dinosaurs ate a bunch of volunteers on Saturday night because talent found a way.
I've spent that entire time trying to think who I am in that analogy, and I think I'm the guy who underestimates the dinosaurs and thinks it's okay to take a dump while they're running wild, and then gets picked up off the toilet by the T-Rex and ripped in half.
You're like, I don't think these dinosaurs can beat Tennessee. I'm going to drop a deuce. And then T-Rex Jeremiah Smith turned you into a snack. Oh.
Yeah, that's it. That's who I am.
Clever girl. Talent finds a way. So, but now they're here. Now they're here, and I think there's no reason to not that they won't lean into this the rest of the way. And then, frankly, this is good enough to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to have that discussion in the first 15 minutes, but it's absolutely good enough to do it all.
Yeah, no, I think everyone knows that, right? This is well, we'll see what happens, but this is a potential. They are who we thought they were moment in a good way,
Yes.
right? Yeah, so we'll see what happens. You had a different perspective on this because you were watching it on television. I was in the shoe. I thought the environment was awesome. And honestly, the number of Tennessee fans that were there, I think, helped contribute to that. But I want to read a couple from people who were there who I think also have some unique perspectives about just what it was like to be in the shoe on Saturday night. Jordan said, this is the greatest game I've ever been to as a fan. He's from Knoxville.
Wow.
He was at the 2017 Penn State comeback. And he asked, is this maybe Ryan Day's best game considering the stakes? And then Sullivan, again, another loyal texter, always very thoughtful. I am a Georgia student and works for the football team. He's from Marysville. He said, don't get my fandom twisted, but he goes to Georgia. He's a Buckeye fan. That environment last night was on par with a top 10 matchup at Georgia. He said, my dad lives in Auburn, and I've been to many Auburn games, and that was on par with Jordan-Hare Stadium. So he thought that the shoe put on I always hate I don't want to use the SEC as a standard, but people do. So whatever, like an SEC style kind of environment for the first playoff game in Ohio Stadium. And then Sullivan ended by saying, that might have been more fun than when I rushed the field after the Penn State win in 2021. And that game, Garrett Wilson gave him his gloves. So that was a nice moment for Sullivan, and he thought this was better. This was better.
Wow.
So how did it come across watching it on television? Because I thought it was an awesome environment. Like Ohio State changed some things up to like alter the game presentation a little bit, and I think get the fans into it more, which I thought worked quite well. But I know sometimes it looks or feels or sounds a little different on TV.
Yeah, I felt like, and again, I was driving for part of it early on, so I wasn't as 100% locked in as everybody watching this show right now. But it did feel like a decent amount of the discussion on the broadcast was about how many Tennessee fans were there. So that clearly was the talking point early on. But if the idea is that actually putting some Tennessee fans in the stands then caused the Ohio State fans who were there to rise up even more, because instead of it being 100%, it was whatever percent, somewhere between 75 and 80 and 85% of the stadium was Ohio State fans.
Mm-hmm.
But then that 80% felt like, oh man, like we have to rise up even more. I actually think there's I was at the SMU Penn State game, and SMU wasn't even 1%. There was no playoff vibe to that at all. I don't even remember. I was not super on the lookout for it, but didn't seem like a big deal of them playing the SMU video. I don't know what it was. It just felt like a regular Penn State home game. And so it was jacked, and it was a great environment. But if you would have closed your eyes and said, like, it just would have felt like a big game during the regular season for Penn State. That this was different. I think what people are saying is, like, you'll remember it partly because it is different.
Mm-hmm.
And that congrats to the Tennessee fans who cared enough to show up and make that drive, and the logistics of it and being not that far away made it more possible. But there've been a lot of big time games in Ohio Stadium. And so if this was not like all the others, and then the outcome is fantastic, I can see why people would say, and that's the thing, this will stand alone. And I know there was going to be an offseason discussion about, should there be more campus games? We talked about it last night. But as it stands now, you're only going to get one of these a year. So then the one can stand alone. It's not like now Ohio State has to go to Oregon, or Oregon's going to come to Ohio Stadium. And then if Oregon wins in Ohio Stadium, like, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fans and the stadium and the atmosphere did its job and maximized the opportunity. And so that's kind of cool. Like, there's nothing left to that. Right. And that, I know Notre Dame fans, having been there during this year, and players really felt that when they played their last home game in Notre Dame Stadium, they were all saying, I at that point, because Notre Dame can't get a bye, they were saying, we hope we're back here. We think we will be. That they were looking forward to one more. Now, Ohio State, it's a different situation. They could not have gone into the Michigan game saying, like, well, we hope this is not our last home game. because they thought they were going to get a bye. But as it turned out, for everybody involved, that the last home game in Ohio Stadium of 2024 was not the Michigan loss is also cool.
Yeah.
So tip of the cap to the playoff for the opportunity and the memories that this structure provides.
Yeah. I want to a couple more just like quick ones on the vibes. Michael said, simply put, we're back. So that's a succinct way of looking at it. Ryan said, been waiting for this team to go, quote, Death Star mode all year, and that was fun to watch. Arlen, I think echoing what you just touched on a minute ago, Doug. I was nervous about what Ohio State might what version of Ohio State might show up last night, but Coach Day and this team truly elected to leave no doubt. Now they have a real chance for the Natty if they don't let this energy, excitement, and talent slip back out of the bottle. And we'll drill down, I think, on some more specific stuff. But before we move on from the vibey part of this, what do you think of? So it was Jordan who asked or posited, I guess, like, was this the best game we've seen from Ryan Day, considering the position he was in going into it?
So who are the other contenders are 2020 Clemson revenge semifinal.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I've caught myself like 3 times on this show doing it, being like, well, the Georgia win 2 years ago in the same situation. It's like, no, that wasn't a win.
Right.
But that at the time was the greatest loss in Ohio State history. And so, I think maybe even like to some degree doing that in Atlanta against a team that good and coming that close when so many things went wrong and went against them, there's a part of me that still almost thinks that was better, because that Georgia team was a national championship level team and this Tennessee team is clearly not. That doesn't take away from Ohio State's win. But I probably would not put it number 1, but I thought they were going to win. And I was not as scared of Tennessee. But I understand everybody who really thought they could lose. And being a touchdown favorite, that's not a guarantee of anything. So if you really were coming into the game thinking they could lose, then yeah, I think it is number 1. So, and now it's not the discussion for today. I don't think, Bill, of like, well, is this enough now that they showed this? If they go and ball out and play a great game against Oregon and lose, like, is not as all forgiven, but is the program back on track and Ryan Day and this staff can stay and it's not going to be a horrible offseason? That again, that Georgia loss saved the offseason. I thought it put Ohio State back on track. Would a good loss to Oregon do the same on the back of this excellent, excellent win? Or do they need to go do more? So we have time for that, but it's not just like the one. There's 2 things. Again, we're back on 2 paths, Bill. You're 2 jobs, Bill. I'm 2 paths, Doug. There's 2 paths here. One is trying to win a national championship, which is obviously the most important path. But the other is getting the program back on track. And if they win the national championship, of course, the program's back on track. But could you fix path 2 even without path 1? And that's really important because it's about who's going to be the coach, and it's about how everybody who cares about this team and is part of this team is going to feel about the program in the offseason. So the first path is all that matters, but the second path is also there. So.
Yeah, I would say as someone who I thought Ohio State could lose, and I picked Ohio State to lose. I don't know that I would put this number 1 because 2020 Clemson was like the build up to that. It was just like a year-long obsession with getting Clemson back, and then like the game itself was awesome. I guess maybe the fact that it was played in a basically empty Superdome takes away from it a little bit, but like planning and aggression and just sort of like juice, I thought that was the best one. But this might be second, because I don't think, even if the Georgia game was great, like they still lost, I don't think I could put a loss over a win. So I would say this is number 2 probably behind that 2020 Clemson game.
I did think early on when they were dicing and slicing that it reminded me, which is the game when Ryan Day really felt like, as the coordinator, he had Don Brown's number against Michigan. Was it
18?
17? It's 18. It felt like 18 to me when they were getting one-on-one matchups in man and just like beating guys across the field on crossers. I just had Demario McCall, Devin Bush thoughts in my head. And And that's not Ryan Day, the head coach, but I think that for a lot of people is if we're doing like Ryan Day's best performance ever, like as whatever his job was, that's really, really high on the list.
Yes.
And that I got vibes of that of we know we have talent, but we're going to schematically maximize our talent and destroy you play after play by putting these guys in situations to win matchups. And as they were getting up 21-0, that was in my head.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk some O-line?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a couple. There was a lot of people feeling great about the O-line. Here are a few things I grabbed. Austin said, I think the guard play last night was excellent, and I think those boys deserve a shout out. We're going to give them one. Brian said, my sound off was on Luke Montgomery. That guy was a mauler all night long. I was so impressed by how he finished blocks. It's almost like he has a great coach or something. Go Bucks. And then Will said, I don't think Tegra played awful, Tegra Shabola, but I think Luke Montgomery is now part of the best five up front. Do you agree?
Austin Sarabeld, 46 snaps. Tegra Shabola, 39 snaps. Luke Montgomery, 31 snaps. Looking at the numbers, I was actually a little surprised by that because I think especially the Montgomery pancake block was big for a lot of people. I would have thought he played more because then once he got in there, he didn't start, but then once he got in, it seemed like you felt him. And I think people were on the lookout for it. And then it was like, okay. So for people saying, I would be in the camp of like, okay, it's Luke Montgomery time. And it's like, well, he played the third most snaps in the 3-guard rotation. So is it? Tegra in pass protection, I still think is an issue at times. I mean, and he was early, but I don't have a lot of faith there. I think he just, because when he loses immediately.
Yes.
He just like loses with his hands and it's over. And all of a sudden he's turning and chasing a guy into the backfield. So his losses blow up plays. I feel like I'm at Luke Montgomery as the left guard and rotate Sarabeld and Shabola based on hot hand, perhaps what you want to do in that game. And I think if you're going to run it, Tegra is probably okay. But if you feel like you need to throw it more, maybe that means Tegra's not in very much. But that's not what the numbers of the snaps told us. So Luke Montgomery did what a lot of people hoped he would do. So congrats to a young guy seizing his opportunity, but I think he only gets better from here. And I think he'll be better against Oregon even than he was here because it wasn't a start, but this was his first real contribution.
Yeah, I thought he earned a starting job too. I would also like to see him play at left guard, and then if you want to rotate at right guard still or ride the hot hand, whatever. I think that's okay. I will say, like, I thought Tegra settled in after that first drive where he gave up that pressure that was saved by the face mask. He wasn't perfect from there on out, but this was the best he's played in a while. Without question, was the best he's played in a while, and so that was good to see. I still just think they get a little more out of Sarabeld, and Luke Montgomery really opened my eyes. I just wasn't sure. He's not really, in my opinion, he's not built so much like a guard where he's 320-ish pounds, or he's got that kind of lower center of gravity. He's kind of in between a tackle and a guard. So I wondered if he'd be able to move people the way he was moving people on Saturday night, if he'd be able to anchor in pass protection against one of Tennessee's defensive tackles, the guy that went down a couple of times, is 340 pounds. Like there were some big dudes over there. And I wondered how Luke might handle that. And again, like he wasn't perfect either, but I thought he checked a lot of boxes, and that pancake block was really cool. There was another rep, 4th and 4 play. I think it was the drive that ended with the interception. There was a 4th and 4 play completion to Jeremiah Smith where Donovan Jackson was actually soloed up with James Pierce and just kind of stonewalled him. But like as he was finishing that rep and like setting his feet and just kind of just stopping James Pierce in his place, Luke Montgomery then came over and then knocked James Pierce to the ground and was like, okay, like that's a mentality from the guard position that I maybe has just been lacking a little bit. As I think like guys like Tegra and Austin Sarabeld are like trying to search for their confidence or whatever. And it just seemed like Luke Montgomery kind of had it from the jump, which against that team on that stage was, just made it kind of all the more impressive. So I think he's ready. I severely questioned whether he would be, and I thought the rotating guards was going to be a disaster in this game, but it kind of worked. So yeah, those guys do deserve a shout out, as Austin said, and Justin Fry probably does too. Not probably, Justin Fry does too, I think, for getting those guys ready. And then Chip Kelly gave him a good plan. I thought like the run schemes suited those guys, especially Tegra, especially Tegra, better than the run schemes they were trying to run against Michigan. So I don't, Oregon's defensive line is good. If Ohio State passes Oregon and gets to Texas, Texas's defensive line is very good. So it's not going to get any easier for Ohio State moving forward. But to pass that test the way that the offensive line did, I think it's reasonable to feel pretty confident that Ohio State can work with what they have right now.
58 offensive snaps for PFF. This was how the breakdown went. Left guard, Montgomery, 31, Sareveld, 27. Right guard, Shabola, 39, Sareveld, 19. Mm-hmm. So really, it's a pretty equal rotation, and Sareveld split his time between the two. And if that's what they want to do, then that's okay too. Again, it's taken them a while. Justin Fry deserves credit for this. We've talked about it before. It took them too long at times this year to figure out the way to solve problems, because that's what coaching is. The season's not going to go perfectly. You're going to have injuries. How do you solve the problems when they happen? And they didn't solve them the right way initially, but that they got to Montgomery here at this point, and just maybe he wasn't ready before. Maybe he could not have been part of the solution 6 weeks ago. But he played well enough that makes me think, well, I don't know, maybe he could have been, but he's ready now. So this was always beginning of the year, Bill, right? Wasn't it really, can the offensive line be good enough for them to win a national championship? And then I think when McLaughlin and Simmons were doing their thing, we got past that. We went beyond good enough to this offensive line actually might be good. And then the injuries happened, and then it was, now they're not good enough. But I think here, entering the quarterfinals, we probably are back to where we were at the beginning of the year after a roller coaster ride, which is good enough. Is it good? Is it, let's measure the 8 remaining offensive lines and see if Ohio State's one of the 3 best? No, it's not. But it certainly was good enough on Saturday night. No doubt about it. And that's all they need.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I one other thing I would want to point out, I guess, is we're having that conversation because we have talked so much about what's going on in the interior and the ability or lack thereof to solve problems quickly, is that Donovan Jackson and Josh Fryer have been very solid for Ohio State, and especially Josh Fryer. I was having a lot of back and forth with some people on Friday night about like Carter Smith at Indiana and like kind of relitigating whether or not Ohio State should have gone after him and what this offensive line might have looked like. And in the course of that, like, I wanted to make it clear that like whatever that conversation is, it's not a conversation about like Josh Fryer not being good enough. I think he's had a very nice step forward this year. And I guess the fact that we don't talk about him a ton is a reflection of that. So I thought he had another solid game. There was it was Quinshon Judkins' second rushing touchdown. If you go back and watch that play, Josh Fryer and Tegra Shabola together just knocked the Tennessee defensive tackle like 3 yards into the end zone. And that's exactly where the run goes. It was one of those lead kind of fullback runs with Patrick Gerd blocking. But Josh Fryer has been very good. He was first team all Big Ten last year, which I thought was wrong. And might have been like third team or honorable mention this year. And I think he is significantly better this year than he was last year. And Donovan Jackson continues to do a really nice job at left tackle. He's had to move the left tackle, and he's had to face Abdul Carter and James Pierce in a handful of games that he's played at left tackle. And I think he's handled himself quite well. So I just wanted to point that out because we've talked a lot about what the issues are and could be, and not very much at all about 2 guys who I think are playing well.
On both sides of the ball, pressures in that game, according to PFF, the Ohio State defensive line had 25. The Tennessee defensive line had 8. Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau each had 7. Tyleik Williams had 6. First round projected pick James Pierce Jr. for Tennessee had 2. So that's tackles doing their job. Now, again, when James Pierce Jr. was kind of popping the most, it was, we're leaving him unblocked and, on purpose as we run opposite him, and he's tracking something down from the backside. I think he made a tackle. They one of the bubble screens they threw right to Emeka, I think on a third down, where the blocking got a little clogged up a little bit, and he chased it down from the backside. And it's like, that's just a guy. That's like athleticism and motor doing something you don't expect. But when it was time to go heads up, let's go, Donovan Jackson and Josh Fryer pretty much even better than Abdul Carter, because when that was the game, Donovan Jackson there were moments against Abdul Carter where Abdul Carter smoked Donovan Jackson. Like, okay, that's going to happen. I'm not even sure. Was there a single rep where James Pierce Jr. just smoked Donovan Jackson and you had to just tip your cap and say that's going to happen? I thought he did his job the entire game.
Yeah.
If we go back on this, and I'm sure we'll do something like this on the podcast feed or whatever at the end of the year, like MVP, if you really want to talk about valuable, Donovan Jackson is making a case here. With what value is. And then even they were talking on the broadcast when Josh Fryer hurt his ankle and they had to retape it. And I think they were right. I mean, Herbie and Fowler were basically saying, like, he's not allowed to get hurt because I don't know what they would do. And I was thinking, like, okay, Herbie, over. And then I was like, oh, actually, I don't know what they would do either. What?
I have no idea. Yeah.
I was assuming, I started to think, like, I think maybe it's a series where they had a Shabola and Montgomery in, and I was like, are they saving Sareveld now in case he has to go play right tackle? Like, it just would be so for Donovan Jackson to play out of position and for them to tell Josh Fryer, hey, Josh, just so you know, by the way, you are not allowed to get hurt. And so I think he'd be out there like on one leg, because one-legged Josh Fryer at this point is better than any option behind him. So that's a tough spot to be in. And that guy played through it, and immense credit to both those guys.
So the starting offensive line, and I guess this is any offensive lineman, Luke Montgomery allowed 2 pressures. Austin Sareveld allowed 2. Josh Fryer allowed 1. It was on the play where he twisted his ankle and he fell to the ground. No sacks for Tennessee. No quarterback hits for Tennessee. Tennessee, I think, had 8 tackles for loss, but 1 of them was on the pass that you mentioned, and 3 of them were in the fourth quarter when the starters were out of the game. So, like,
yeah,
that's about as good as you could hope for, I think, given Ohio State's situation and how good Tennessee's front is.
Yeah, I mean, and they did have a sack. They wiped it out with the face mask, so that's why it doesn't show up in the stats. But that the first series, the first third down of the game, was completely blown up by ineffective offensive line play. Was here we go. That was everybody's worst nightmare. That was what you were justifiably concerned about, and then it didn't happen again. Is across the board credit to everybody involved.
So that was a sort of like the biggest on-field offensive thing that people were kind of keyed in on. We did get some questions about the defensive performance, and it was a very good one. Zach asked, would you call that the best collective defensive line game basically since Chase Young left? So go all the way back to the end of the 2019 season. Since then, would you call that the best defensive line game you've seen from Ohio State? I think I would. I think I don't know. Again, the 2020 Clemson game, that defensive line was getting after it pretty good, if I can recall correctly. I'm trying to think of others off the top of my head. Like, obviously, JT Tuimoloau did what he did against Penn State in 2021, but that was sort of a one-man wrecking crew situation. And Jack Sawyer did something similar last year against Missouri. But I thought Jack and JT and Tyleik Williams were borderline unblockable in this game. All 3 of them. And I don't know. I don't think we've seen a game with those 3 playing together where all 3 were playing that well and having that much of an impact on the game.
No, I think that's true collectively, because the collective looked like what we expected Tennessee to be. So can I just, by the way, so again, just to, because, and they were doing the thing, which is what really wrecks games, which is just, you're just beating guys one-on-one and making plays. This is not the end all be all, but the JT monster game against Penn State in 2022.
Yeah.
Well, but a lot of it, again, is he was not necessarily winning one-on-one matchups. He won like 2 of them, and he had a strip sack or whatever, but he was like getting blocked and then jumping in the air and tipping passes because he's an incredible athlete with a motor. But in that game, he had 3 pressures. In this game, he had 7. So I actually think like he was winning more. I think that Penn State game has taken on a life of his own. He was not winning every snap. Like the game when Chase Young had 4 snaps the year he was a Heisman 4 sacks the year he had a Heisman finalist, it felt like he was winning off the snap every single play.
against Wisconsin. Yeah.
The ball was snapped and they couldn't block him. You couldn't run
Yeah.
offense because they couldn't block him. They were blocking JT. And then after he was blocked, he was reading things. He was making athletic plays. This was back to, we can't block them. So that's my favorite measurement. The we
Yes.
can't block you measurement. My two favorite measurements are the do your job measurement on offense and the we can't block you measurement for a defense. And this was a we can't block you game, to the point that they took out the right tackle. And it's a little bit, let's make sure we call it correctly. Their tackles stink. But guess what? Good defenses do, and skilled edge guys do. They destroy bad tackles, and they destroyed bad tackles all game. And so we've had times where these like, oh, here's Mike Hall, Mike Hall's getting some interior pressure, but it is about one guy. They have 3 high draft picks on the defensive line, and all 3 looked like it and couldn't be blocked together. So great call by the texter. Agree. Yes.
I thought it was Tyleek was what I was most interested about coming into the game, because he had been playing banged up for like the back half of the year, and I've said this a couple of times. I just don't think he's looked like himself for the second half of the season, and I think those 3 weeks or whatever it was did him a lot of good, because I thought he looked fresh. He ended up, I believe he played the most of any defensive lineman in this game, or at least any defensive tackle in this game. And
he did. He had 44 snaps. That's the most.
Yeah, they did. I was also glad to see them rotate, because they were going to have, they didn't rotate at all against Michigan. Playing this Tennessee offense that plays so fast, that gives you a pretty high volume of plays, they were going to have to. So they played a decent amount of like Edric Houston at tackle. Ty Hamilton obviously played at tackle too. Caden McDonald got in late. They played Kenyatta Jackson a decent amount, and I actually thought he played pretty well too at defensive end. So that's a necessary component, I think, of Ohio State's championship pusher moving forward. Is you have to find more than just those top 4 guys to play on the defensive line consistently, and this was a nice start to that. But yeah, I did think that the front 4, I guess like really the front 6 kind of took it over. And we talked about, when we were previewing the game on Kings of Columbus and on Kings of the North, how Ohio State might play it, whether they would, play with a light box and trust that they can control the run that way, or put extra resources in there and let their corners kind of play on islands. And it was the former. Like they did play with a light box for much of that game. And what was left unsaid, at least by me, when I was talking about that and expressing some concerns about Ohio State's defensive line, is just how good Jack and JT are as run defenders. They have been excellent at it their entire career. I underestimated it or overlooked it, whatever that was, when I was like trying to make my pick and thinking about the things that I thought could go awry for Ohio State in this game. And clearly that did not happen. Those 2 guys, like, I get the conversations about more sack production or whatever, although in this game that was also good. But they're excellent against the run, and they always have been. And that was so important in this game, because I don't know if it would have been any different if Jim Knowles at some point felt like he had to start putting 7 or 8 guys down in the box, because Tennessee doesn't have a whole lot at receiver. But if you can play, it was the same thing we saw from Georgia when Georgia played Tennessee. If you can play this offense with a light box and just smother the receivers that just don't have a whole lot to them, then it becomes nearly impossible for Tennessee to function as an offense. And we saw that on Saturday night.
So this is why I was kind of vociferous during the week of like, they have to win this game. Like they have everything they need to win this game. So they showed that. And this is hard for Tennessee. It's like, okay, you give wide splits and you make the back 7 in the front play a different game or whatever. But if you can't block them, then it doesn't matter if they're playing a different game. And they couldn't block them. And John Campbell, that right tackle, again, I don't know if he got benched or if he got hurt, but he only played 25 snaps. He gave up 5 pressures in 25 snaps. They destroyed the weak link. Destroyed. So now Oregon, back to it, completely different issue. But Oregon also plays completely differently. And part of it here is, Bill, and I think you knew this, and I think this tied into a little bit of the questions or concerns, is they didn't blitz Nico at all. I think they only blitzed him 10% of the time, because you can't, when you get spread out and what they're doing, right, it makes it hard. If you're blitzing and now you're stuck in one-on-one matchups, or you're bringing safeties and you don't have help, you're setting yourself up to give up big plays. They didn't have to blitz him at all because these guys got pressure. But so if you don't get the pressure, then you have to blitz. Now Tennessee starts working its scheme against you. We're going back to normal football. The wide splits went back to Tennessee with their tails between their legs and their cold dog That cold dog in a blanket was sitting on wide splits the whole game. Here, buddy, here, we have a nice little pillow of wide splits for you to put your dog butt on. Whatever. They didn't have the goods to do what they wanted to do. But now JT and Jack need to have great games against two great tackles in Josh Connolly and Johnny Cornelius. But also now we're back to they didn't get enough pressure in the Oregon game. Since then, Knowles has been a creative blitzer. Now he gets to be a creative, effective, get-home blitz caller with Sonny Styles and Cody Simon. It's all back to normal because you can do what you do. So Jack and JT and Tyleek don't have to do it by themselves. But I hope they can carry some confidence from this. And I hope Jim Knowles is a mad genius against Oregon and we get the best version of the Ohio State defense. But man, they have to be flying in with a ton of confidence because this was a supreme. And then we have to give credit to the back end because the times that those guys were stuck in one-on-one coverage, they absolutely handled it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to get harder against Tez Johnson, and Denzel Burke's going to have Evan Stewart's name tattooed on his arm for the next 10 days, getting ready for that rematch. But they handled this. So back end and front four, one-on-one, they looked like five-star recruits. They looked like day one and day two NFL draft picks, which is, again, what you would have hoped, but you couldn't have guaranteed.
Yeah. They blitzed Nico Iamaleava 4 times on 44 dropbacks, but they pressured him 43% of the time.
That's magic.
It's a different beast. It's going to be a different beast against Oregon. We all know that. But this
is slay the beast in front of you.
Yeah. But I think they're equipped to. We'll break down that game as we get closer to it. He's got his swords with him.
I don't normally bring the sword out on Kings of Columbus, but you slay the beast in front of you.
There. Yeah.
You're not looking past. Listen, sometimes there's a West Coast dragon, but if there's a sad little dog in a blanket in front of the dragon, you got to slay the sad little dog first. Come here, dog. Let me run you through. Is that blanket made of armor? No, it's just cotton and polyester. Oh, this is pretty easy.
Was the dog actually there? Did they show the dog on TV?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I got memed. I just saw there was a picture of a dog in a blanket everywhere. I think it was
Herbie's dog. Herbie's dog was there. I know that.
No, this was like a bloodhound. This was like a sad Tennessee bloodhound or whatever they have down there.
I didn't walk around to see if the dog was there because it was too cold. And I left my hat and my gloves in the car.
Are you kidding me? We got credit on the Friday night show from one of I think it might have been Aaron or somebody, one of our very loyal listeners who said they went from our show talking about how you were very smart to bring your hat and gloves, helped by your lovely wife. And then she went immediately to Ari's post-game show. And the first thing Ari said was, I forgot my gloves. So that we are the smart, prepared show of gloves. And Ari's out there in shorts. And then you forgot your gloves for this one. What are you doing, bro?
I did. Yeah. It was bad. It was a bad scene. Because this was cold. I think I said it on KATN last night. This was colder than I thought it was in South Bend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was quite frigid. I don't have we have these. Sorry. Playoff picture, unless is there anything else you want to say on the game before we do that?
So I do just think there was Lathan Ransom is an excellent safety. There were a couple of those things again. Like it's one of those things. I thought it was a reminder. It's a nice reminder for Ohio State fans about how many good players they have, because this game I think required a lot of individual matchups to be won, and it's been an interesting ride with this defense because I think the collective of 1 through 11 has always been respected, even though I thought they gave it up in the fourth quarter against Michigan and had a chance to make a championship stand, and they didn't. But usually the statistical, hey, the defense played well enough. But I think within that, Bill, there have been a lot of moments of individually guys not being quite what they thought that we were, what we thought they should be, or what we thought they could be. So 1 for 11, they're good, but I think we've had individual critiques of Davison Igbinosun, of Denzel Burke, of Sonny Styles in the middle of the year, of Jack and JT. I think you go through maybe everybody other than the safeties. They've been individually critiqued at times. And then as a collective, they played great on defense. But I thought 1 through 11 individually, they also had moments to shine. And so there were just some plays. Who had the pick? There was a pick that was wiped out by the late hit. Yeah, which was a goofy. I
That was a
didn't
bad
think
call.
that should
That was
have
like
been called.
like body weight. Was that what I didn't hear what they said on the
Yeah.
broadcast?
Yeah, it was body
weight.
weight. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Nico was in the air when Kenyatta Jackson hit him. And he didn't drive him. He landed on him, but he didn't like extra drive him.
Yeah.
So I thought you saw, I don't know if it's worth looking at the PFF grades, but I thought there were a couple moments with Igbinosun where you saw the wrapped all over you tight coverage from Igbinosun without the penalties, which is a reminder of when that guy can keep himself from being grabby. He's like a tarantula on you, man. So I just thought some individual moments for the defense was worth shouting out. Okay.
The only defensive penalty, I guess, it was at least accepted was the Kenyatta Jackson roughing the passer.
Okay. Yeah.
Nothing in the secondary.
At the very least, borderline.
Yeah. That what was that? Tennessee ran like that third down speed option play, and Lathan Ransom like practically caught the pitch before the running back did.
Yeah.
And I think I turned to Austin in the press box. I was like, we don't talk enough about how good this guy is. His anticipation and the way that he can dissect plays is super impressive.
And I think like almost the camera, when they went and ran that replay, like the camera panned across. And I think it might have been that like Sonny, Cody, and Lathan were lined up right next to each other. And it's just one of those, again, where it's like, where are you going?
Yeah.
Who's not going to read this and trigger and make a play? And it's like, there's nowhere to go. And it reminded me again, I was always obsessed in 14 with Joey Bosa, Darren Lee, Von Bell stack on one side of the line, where it's like, okay, these are three guys on this side of the field. You think you're going to attack the run, middle or deep? You're joking. Like there's nowhere to go. And I thought there were some nowhere to go moments for the Tennessee offense. A lot of them, a lot of nowhere to go moments against this 1 through 11.
Yeah. So let's flip it forward a little bit. So Mark said this was a confident and angry team. I think we got a glimpse of the potential, which should be very concerning for the other 7 teams remaining. And then we'll parlay that into this one. It was from the 321 area code. Actually, I sent this question in twice. After the win against Tennessee, does it change your thoughts on the CFP bracket? So I have like Oregon, Notre Dame in a title game, and I think you do too, right?
Yes. I have Oregon winning the national championship.
Yeah, and I have Notre Dame winning the national championship against Oregon. I had Ohio State losing this game, clearly. You did not. You had Ohio State winning this game and then losing in the Rose Bowl. Well, I'm not going to ask you to like make a pick now on the Rose Bowl, but are you feeling any differently? Do you feel like you need to go back and like reassess some things based off of that, what we saw about from Ohio State against Tennessee?
So I think the 2 best teams left are Oregon and Ohio State. I don't think this quarterfinal is a de facto national championship. I think Notre Dame and Penn State are too competent for that. I think Georgia still defensively has too much talent to completely erase them. We have to see what they look like with their backup quarterback. And obviously Texas has potential. I think Boise State is clearly number 8 of who's left. And I think Arizona State is clearly number 7. And then I think Georgia with the backup quarterback and not anybody in the skill positions to have faith in is clearly number 6 right now. And if you want to have betting markets reflect otherwise, that's fine. That's just Southern people trying to throw their money away. So then the other top 5 is the 3 Big Ten teams in Notre Dame plus what you think Texas can be. So I'm not saying that the Ohio State-Oregon winner is for sure the national champ, but I think that's who I believe the national champion will be. And I think that if you could make a bracket that was like the winner of this game will win the national championship, I think a lot of people thought that way. I was not all the way there before this game because you had to see it. But now that you've seen it, I'm not going to underestimate Oregon. But I certainly, and the betting line reflects it, this is like a 1-point game. Sitting here on Sunday morning, I think Ohio State-Oregon is a toss-up. And I think the Ohio State-Oregon winner will win the national championship. I'm not pounding the table saying that. But this version of Ohio State, and then it's just, they beat Michigan and then on the opposite side of the bracket, then you might be headed towards this as the national championship game. But this is the way it worked out. And it's fine. And now we'll be back, and I'm sure it's going to come up in the next 10 days. We'll be back to the theory that I wondered about when the bracket came out is if you're going to get Oregon, do you want them now? Because are they going to be rested or rusty? Because Ohio State now is coming in with a ton of momentum. And Oregon had a really good win over Penn State, but Penn State kind of hung around, ran the ball well. Like, there's no real questions about Ohio State right now. Ohio State had a million questions coming in. They answered them all. There's no questions about Ohio State. So now if you're going to ask questions, I think the two questions that you're asking about this game at the moment are Oregon rested or rusty and Oregon run defense. And it's like, okay, so that means coin flip. So I'm not reevaluating everything, but I'm also not guaranteeing I'm going to pick Oregon once we get to the game, because that was my bracket then. And now this is after Ohio State had a dominant performance. Can Ohio State win the national championship? No doubt about it. 1,000% they can win it. And on the other side, I've talked about Notre Dame having the highest floor potentially. Notre Dame's ceiling is not as high as the ceiling Ohio State showed on Saturday night. So if Ohio State beats Oregon and somehow seems Notre Dame in the national championship game, then just as long as Ohio State doesn't play a knucklehead game, as long as Ohio State Will Howard doesn't throw a pick six, right? Ohio State has more than Notre Dame has. Notre Dame has a lot, but the Buckeyes can win it. How about you?
They can definitely win it. I don't know, so I picked Notre Dame to beat Oregon because I had Ohio State losing to Tennessee, and I thought Oregon was going to obviously get through there. And then the thought of Penn State running the ball away it did against Oregon, I felt favorable to me for Notre Dame if Notre Dame were to get Oregon in the national championship in Atlanta. And I still feel that way if that's going to be the matchup. Like, I'm not going to come off my national championship pick or anything like that. I just didn't know what kind of Ohio State team we were going to get, and I know I wasn't alone in that. And there were a lot of questions of, is there a dominant team in college football? Is there a team from a talent standpoint that is clearly above the rest of the pack? And I think you can make that claim for Oregon, although maybe you're questioning it a little bit based on what we saw from Oregon's defense in the Big Ten championship game. And I think Ohio State perhaps convinced a lot of people that they're that team now. And a dominant Ohio State, I think, just maybe changes the tenor of the entire playoff. But people were waiting to see if we were going to get that, and we got it. So that's changed for me for sure. I don't know what I'm going to pick in the Rose Bowl yet, and I never doubted much Ohio State's ability to win a national championship if you could tell me that this was the version of Ohio State that we're going to get. But I'm rethinking things a little bit. I guess we're going to dive into the matchups with the Oregon game. I'm going to go rewatch that Oregon game a couple times probably, and we'll come up with a better breakdown of what we're giving right here. But very good Ohio State, I think, can change your view on things pretty quickly, and they certainly did for me. So I'm not changing my final picks or anything like that now, and nor would I. I made the picks, I'm going to stand on them. But the landscape feels a little different to me now, I guess, maybe is what I'm saying after what we saw from Ohio State.
I mean, when we said it beforehand, I mean, it was hard. I don't know that there were many people watching this right now who were all in on Ohio State before the game, all in on, I'm sure they're going to win the national championship. I said, let me reevaluate by the middle of the second quarter. By the middle of the second quarter, Ohio State was standing on that dog's neck. I was like, let the dog up. Can you give the dog a blanket? Gosh. So this line has already moved. Last night, right after, I think Ohio State was a 1-point favorite over Oregon. As we record this Sunday morning, they're a 2.5-point favorite over Oregon. They have better odds than Oregon to win the national title at this point. Texas is the favorite, which I honestly don't get. Texas is plus 330, Ohio State plus 360, Oregon plus 425, Penn State plus 500, Georgia plus 550, Notre Dame also plus 550, and then Boise State and Arizona State basically off the board. So between 3.5 to 1 to 5.5 to 1 for the top six is pretty nicely clumped. But in a lot of ways, we're back to where we were at the start of the year, where everybody thought the four most talented, best teams were Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Georgia. They're still left. And by the way, then Penn State and Notre Dame rose up with great seasons to prove they belong there, and here we are. So that's the deal.
Is Texas the favorite because Texas is playing a 4 seed that shouldn't be a 4 seed, and then if it wins that game, it will play a beat up version or potentially beat up version of Ohio State or Oregon that has had to run a little bit of a gauntlet to get there? Is that why that's the case?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if there's just the South is looking for
Yeah.
desperation. Like they're that there's a chunk of the country looking for someone to believe in. So
Mhm.
they're coalescing around somebody. So
Yeah.
um
You getting
I
kicked out of
just
your hotel room?
I mean I got late checkout. It's
Mm.
whatever. I don't know. I don't know that like what is it? I mean, we know Texas's defense is good, and I mean Tennessee has a bad run defense. Texas ran it all over them, but again, like individually, the individual people. I mean, Texas has a good offensive line. Texas has good players,
Yeah.
but I think Texas has had as many questions as anybody during the course of the year. So, um, yeah, I don't.
Texas has, like, still yet to beat an awesome team, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
And they
I
won't have
mean,
to play one until the semifinals if they get there.
yeah. So that their best wins are Texas A&M and Clemson, and what you're going to see in either Oregon or Ohio State is not that.
Yeah.
I would find it odd that like this is that you walk away from this weekend being like, yep, that's the team. It's like, who are you talking about? You talking about Ohio State? You talking about Oregon sitting at home getting fresh? You talking about Penn State with all those pick sixes and couple? It's like, no, Texas. Like, really?
Mm.
Like everything you saw, you were like, that's it. The Texas team that like Clemson cut it to one score and had to have like a goal line stand to like put the game away in the final 8 minutes. Like that? Are you sure?
Yeah.
They finally faced a competent quarterback and he threw for 330 and 3 touchdowns. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not buying it.
okay.
I'm not buying it.
All right. So everybody's good. You're good. Everybody's feeling good.
Everybody's feeling good. Yeah.
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 Okay. Great night for Ohio State football, which
Mhm.
is, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into this and people get mad and whatever, but I think creating opportunities for fans to have wonderful nights and wonderful memories and players and coaches to have great games with their home crowd and go into the history books, like there's a lot of value in that. And so I will pour one out for John Cooper of like, he never got this chance. And this is the first time ever, ever, ever that an Ohio State coach got the chance that Ryan Day got here. Because even in 22, yeah, they lost to Michigan, but that was an excellent Michigan team. It was their first loss, and they were sort of indisputably, like they just
Mhm.
their body of work had said, okay, it's not a stretch to say they deserve this 4-team spot, and they still needed help to get it. They already lost to Oregon, and the way they played against Michigan, it was like they're not one of the 4 best teams. So thank God for them that the first time ever, you don't have to be. And now they showed it again. So it is, it's not going to, you have to live in the world that you're a part of. But what a potential redemption story. And then you have to go, this is the offseason conversation, but you also can't live this way,
Mhm.
right? This is a new opportunity. Let them lose. Absolutely let them lose. You don't have to be perfect anymore. But man, they played with fire. And then
Yeah.
Saturday night, they showed how good they can be. So let's go do this thing in the Rose Bowl, brother, and see what happens. Now you're going. I'm not going. I'm going to Sugar, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty fired up for the Rose Bowl. Are you wishing you were going, or are you happy to go be in the land of the dogs?
No, I got to put on my dog hat
Yeah.
and go bring my
Okay.
sword down there and fight some
Okay.
Southerners. So
All
I'm
right.
good.
Cool. Cool.
And I do think, like, I mean, Notre Dame can absolutely do this. So, like,
Mhm.
it's not like I'm going into the belly of the beast armed with just a blanket. I got 2 swords. I'll be good. But I'll be very intrigued. I'll be sitting in the Sugar Bowl press box watching Ohio State, Oregon, and
Yeah.
and seeing how this thing plays out. So
Bring a
okay,
sweater. It gets cold up there.
in the Sugar Bowl press box.
Yeah, the AC, like, for the stadium, like, blasts right from over the top of the like, it gets very cold in the Superdome
Okay,
press box.
okay. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
Be ready to bring a tank top to California because it's just lovely.
Yeah, I will.
Good luck. All right. Thanks to everybody for joining us here on Sunday Sound Off and being a part of it. We hope Ohio State fans have a great holiday season and a very, very Merry Christmas. You guys justifiably should be in a great mood. And we didn't talk about, did we get any Herbie questions?
We did. I thought you covered it pretty well on KOTN, so I didn't want to make you do it
Yeah.
again. There were a lot of like, what's up with Herbie? Herbie should be excommunicated from Buckeye land. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was quite a bit of that.
Yeah. So you can go watch KOTN and you can find my thoughts on that. The one thing I will say is just about Herbie is like, you got to let your kid go where your kid wants to go. Like your kid has to live his own life. And he has a son at Ohio State and he now has a son committed to Michigan. Good luck to that kid. Like, that's not where this conversation starts, that you're a traitorous Buckeye if your kid goes to Michigan. Like let the kid be a kid. But he had two platforms. The main thing the only thing I wanted to add about Herbie is he had two platforms about Ohio State in the last 2 weeks, one on the selection show and one on the game last night when Ohio State played a dominant game. And he used those platforms twice to talk about how crazy Ohio State fans are. And in a world where the South and the Feinbaum show is like those tree poisoners are celebrated for their passion for being that way. And like, that's the thing about college football. Everybody thinks that every other fan base is the worst. And actually, most of the fan bases are very similar. There are people on the edge who do take it too far. There is a big, giant chunk of very passionate fans. And you just root for different people. But I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I think he's too close to it. And I actually think there's a little bit of responsibility here, potentially with ABC and ESPN. His kid's on the team. He's talking about, I was at senior tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, here's all the things that people said at senior tackle. No media is allowed there. It's just for the people inside the team. Here's exactly what it was like. And it's like, okay, you weren't there as a media member. You were there as a parent. But do you want parents of players calling games? Like, is that because, of course, parents of players are defensive. They're protecting their children. That's completely understandable. So for a parent of a player to be like, fans are crazy, absolutely, you would expect parents to think that coming off a very difficult loss. None of those other parents are doing the game to millions of people. So when he does that, he has to remember he's not calling that game as an Ohio State parent. He's calling it as a representative of the sport of football to the entire world. And when you get out there and tell the world that Ohio State fans are crazy, I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's representative. There is his word, lunatic fringe in every group. But I think to pretend that Ohio State's is larger or worse or more confrontational than anybody else's, I think is not correct. But I think he does it because and I said it, like, it's personal for him. He's much more connected as a former player, but even more now in the moment as a parent of a current player. He's too close to it. And I guess I'm not saying that he should be pulled off any games where his son is part of the team, but maybe I am saying that. Because if he can't disconnect that part of it, call the game, analyze the football, celebrate the pageantry. There's a million things. And it doesn't mean you can't critique things that are wrong. There's a million things wrong with this sport. But I don't think he's serving the audience, and I don't think he is serving the vast majority of Ohio State fans when he keeps hammering this point. And we know how he does it. It's not because he's a former Buckeye. It's because he's too close to it right now. But let his kid go to Michigan. Great. Congratulations to that kid. So, but you can go watch the rest somewhere else. Okay. Celebrate Ohio State fans. We'll have KOTN on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to be in two different places for the postseason. We're going to continue to talk a lot about the best of Northern football and celebrate what has been an awesome season. And this Oregon-Ohio State game is going to be a banger, Landis.
It is. We also have to figure out, I don't know, so when we're going to have a Kings of Columbus next, because Wednesday's Christmas Day. So we'll have to hash that out. I think we'll definitely have at least one more before the Rose Bowl, but maybe we'll only have one more before the Rose Bowl. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. We gotta hang out with the fam.
Yeah.
Because then we're hitting the road. So, but we'll be here. We want to serve you guys. We want to celebrate with you guys. So we'll figure it out. Stay tuned to this channel. And if we don't have a Kings of Columbus, we'll obviously have a ton of great coverage on the podcast with Bill and Berm and Austin and everything you guys do every day. So Thanks to our producer, Mike Yostowski. Thanks to you guys, most of all, for making all of this possible. We're grateful to be part of it with you. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Sunday Sound Off on Kings of Columbus.